attention to tonight's class. All right,
Okay.
we'll go ahead and get started with our first question.
Okay. All right, guys. Question number 1. These are just random health questions. And so some of you may know them already, some of you may not, but there can only be one winner at the end of the day, so they had to be a little bit tough. All right, question number 1. Go ahead, Mom. Over here.
Oh, I can't see back there. When speaking of diets, what does SAD stand for? Does anybody know?
Well,
Back
there's some options on the screen.
Yes. A, Scientific Advisory Diet. B, Southern Alliance Diet. Or C, Standard American Diet.
Everyone says C? Everyone
Okay.
says C? Okay, this is going to be hard.
Be honest. Okay, be honest.
Okay, C.
No, it is C. C is the correct answer, of course.
When you hear that phrase, the SAD diet, that's the Standard American Diet typically.
Unfortunately, yes. Question number 2. Fiber helps with regularity. It can also help to A, control blood sugar, B, lower weight, C, lower cholesterol levels, or D, all of the above. Are you sure? Why wouldn't you think I tricked
We're
you?
going to have to go to the tiebreaker.
I knew once I put all of the above, you guys would say all of the above. And you did. You're good students.
Correct.
Correct. Number 3, true or false? Plants have protein. Yes. It's true.
There to confuse you. You guys got to think.
Students. Okay, 4, true or false? Plants have cholesterol. Oh, I'm so glad you all said that. Yes.
Yeah, this is a good crowd.
Yep. And last question, which type of fat is considered a healthy fat? Think about this.
Let's
This
see.
one's a
They're all
little
going
harder.
quiet now. You see that? You put a real scientific question up there. They're all going quiet.
Is it A, trans fat? Is it B, saturated fat? Is it C, polyunsaturated fat? Or is it D, monounsaturated?
I saw them over there, the first to answer.
Who?
C.
C?
Daniela.
And you are correct. Polyunsaturated fat.
Okay, do we have a winner?
Well, do you want to ask?
That was the first. They were the first to put up C. Yeah. Yeah, you're all winners.
Yes,
you're
are.
all winners.
You are all great students. Should we do well, there's no really tiebreaker.
Yeah, well, we'll save the tiebreaker for another night. We've got a special
That's a good one.
tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Daniela, congratulations. Your gift is over
Okay.
here. Great job.
What's up here?
Okay, guys, and we're going to go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Guthrie at this time.
Yes, it is being live streamed.
Yes.
Wow, there's a lot of you here. I've been sitting on the front row. I got turned around. We're glad you're here for Eat Plants, Feel Whole. Just a little bit of history on it for you. Several years ago, Todd Shobatar, who was in charge of publishing at Advent Health, came to me and said, "I'd like you to write a book." So I worked together with a team to put together a book. And it was quite an experience. It was my first experience writing a book. They told me it was going to be this way. They said it's like having a ball and chain around your ankle. At first it was kind of fun, but 2 years later, it's like, wow, there's a lot of work to this. So we got that done, and they said, it's good, and we would like to expand that. So it was expanded, and we got something called a journal to help people make changes for themselves, and then put together a cookbook. And then, after that was done, they said, now we're going to make a program for Advent Health employees. So the program was all put together very nicely. And then COVID hit. Y'all remember COVID? Yeah. And apparently, at least this is what I'm told, Advent Health had to say, like double the amount of pay they were giving nurses, and things were getting difficult from a financial standpoint. So the finance people said, what can we cut? And they said, publishing is not our core business. So they just cut it. Well, that was kind of a surprise to us, and we were sad. But they said, but we're giving it to you. So we can still use it. So we're very thankful for that. And you and I are the benefit, have the benefit of that. So glad you're here to kind of go through the program. The program has 4 different meetings. It's kind of an introduction to lifestyle medicine. Now, it'll be interesting to find out from some of you what brought you to the program. What are you interested in learning? What would you like to accomplish? And maybe we'll have an opportunity to do that. We're going to go through this kind of introductory. There's 4 different, we're doing them, I think, Sabbath evenings, 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row. So that'll be good. We may have a little bit of a follow-up program as well. So glad you're here for that. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Those of you may or may not know. I'm a physician, graduated from Loma Linda University a long time ago. And I've had a lot of opportunity to be involved in something called lifestyle medicine. Regular allopathic medicine usually thinks about the drug to cure your problem, right? I mean, that's generally what happens when you go to the doctor. Lifestyle medicine says, what can we change in the lifestyle to fix it? Now, there's some things that lifestyle doesn't help with, right? If you fractured your hip, you need an orthopedic surgeon, right? You get in a car accident, well, you need the emergency room, you need to go to let the docs do what they're supposed to do. But if you have diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, there are some other choices. Since those diseases are often caused by our lifestyle choices, by changing those lifestyle choices, we can actually reverse the disease. Now, some doctors now recognizing, they don't like the reversal word, they want to call it, put the disease into remission. That's okay. I understand that. Remission sounds good too, doesn't it? But just kind of making that disease process go away. So I've had the experience in my past. For 5 years, I was the medical director of a lifestyle center where people would come, pay thousands of dollars to come stay with us for a couple and 2.5 weeks, and then we would do the best we could for them to change everything. And we had them kind of not exactly prisoners. I don't want to use that word. I mean, they did choose to come, right? But it was a captive audience, and they had decided to come, and it was miracles that we saw. I was over and over again seeing people coming in kind of hobbling, kind of half asleep into the office for their first visit, and then 2.5 weeks later when I saw them, Doc, I feel great. I just walked a mile. It feels so good. And to see the improvement that you can have when you actually do the right thing is miraculous, and it's amazing. I mean, it's fun to watch. It's great to watch and be part of, but when it's you yourself, there's an awful lot of joy in your heart. I would suggest that there are some people here who may be just wanting to improve their health a little bit, or maybe learn a little more so they can tell their kids or their parents or somebody how to live better, okay? And there may be a place for that, maybe prevent disease, but there are some here who likely have a significant disease, and the medicines just aren't quite doing it. And this type of a program can make huge differences. So I want to encourage you it may sound strange to you in many ways and seem like something difficult to do, but if you put your mind to it and you do it for a month, you start here, you find out what happens at the end of the month. It's not like you have to commit to the rest of your life. You just say, I'm going to give it a try. And I can tell you that I have seen it do miraculous things in people's lives, helping to reverse pain, improve sleep, acid reflux going away, blood sugars coming down, weight coming off, et cetera, et cetera. So it's amazing how God has put us together. Our body works by laws that are reproducible. I spent years studying physiology and how the body works, biochemistry, all of those types of things. And there are laws that you can just count on. They're there. They work every time. And when we obey those laws, our body has built into it, our Creator built in a healing process. That healing process starts, and everything feels better once you get started. The first change you make may seem difficult, but it makes the next one easier. Okay, so I've said a little bit about myself. I've introduced the program. Let's see, what's next? Rules of engagement. We're glad you're all here. And I am happy to answer questions. I would like to lay down the rule that when you ask a question, you not have it about you in particular or even Aunt Millie, but more about the program that's going on and the questions, maybe the science, the things that are presented for other folks. We don't want to take other folks' time for private consultations, although I'll be around afterwards, and if you have questions, I'm willing to answer those without kind of stepping on other people's time toes. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Very good. I think we're planning on about an hour and a half, and I trust that you're prepared for that. A little bit about our materials. I mentioned to you about the book that was The Ball and Chain. Yeah, here it is, okay? And it's very well researched. We have a lot of science put into it. When I wrote the book, I had two audiences. I had, number one, the people who might be... Oh, for questions, that's right. Okay, thank you. Let's see, where was I? Two what? Two audiences, thank you. Thank you, I feel better. One is the people that are getting the program and receiving it and using it and putting it into practice. But the second one is the medical community, because I was actually writing it in a medical community. So whatever I put down in the book, I needed to have a reference for. And I didn't use secondary references like Dr. So-and-so said. No, it was a research project that was, or a research publication that was quoted. So it's got good science in it as well, although we've tried to write it so it's not hard to read. The second thing we did was this a journal to help people along their way. And it's what can we do to improve ourselves from a positive standpoint rather than a don't do this, don't do that sort of a thing. So it's a way of keeping track, and we'll spend some more time on that. What followed was the cookbook. This is the most recent one. And the truth is Advent Health never published this one, but they said, here's all the digital files. So I had to pay for publishing that one. It was a little bit of a surprise. I'm learning things about the publishing work. The last one is this participants guide, which was made for people who are going through the program. Now, I brought a box of them. I didn't know how many people were going to be here. I think we have a limited supply for the number of people who are here. I'm going to be presenting out of this. If you would like to take it home, I think the ladies or somebody is going to pass these out to people who are interested. You could pay for them on your way out if you would like, and at the end of the program. So I think they're going to pass them out now. So I guess we'd ask for hands of people who would like to. The books are $20 a piece, I think is what we decided. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, we've got about 19 of them. And if you'd like, we're going to give them to one per couple, because we have a limited supply. Uh-huh. And his program is going to follow along the book as well. But if you want to take it home, you'll have to purchase it, but you can, yeah. And we'll bring more next Sabbath. I can bring more next week. That won't be a problem. And by the way, I'm keeping this one because I'm presenting out of it, okay? So afterwards, I'm happy to share it with somebody. Now, don't forget the outer aisles over on this side. I see some vigorous hands over here. Uh-oh. It was kind of one-sided, wasn't it? Yeah. He's got one more over there. I apologize, it's my fault for not bringing 2 boxes. I thought 1 box would be plenty, but I had no idea how many people would be coming.
So we've kind of had our welcome and introduction, and let's get into the program here and see what we can learn. So each program, there's 4 kind of chapters in this book, and for the introduction, I'm going to share a paragraph from the introduction page in the book. This is actually written by Todd Shobatar, the publisher and editor-in-chief who worked with me for this book. And he says here, most of my professional career, I have edited and published health and wellness books. Though I'm familiar with many of the best health practices advocated by top experts in the world, like most people, I don't always follow them. There was a real difference between knowing what to do and actually doing it. Can you relate? But something changed when I served as editor-in-chief for the book Eat Plants, Feel Whole. I decided to try the the recommended eating plan for a month, just so I could say I did it. Then a remarkable thing happened. The plan made so much difference in my personal life that I decided to stick it out. Over the course of 6 months, I lost 35 pounds, improved my energy, my nightly sleep, and even my mood improved. Believe it or not, I found these changes surprising because I believed I was already eating a healthy diet. I'm a lifelong vegetarian, though I have always had a real sweet tooth and a big addiction to cheese, chips, and chocolate. Yes, it is possible to eat unhealthy, highly processed foods, even as a vegetarian or a vegan. One of the things I like to say is vegetarian and vegan does not mean healthy, right? It's really eat plants, feel whole. That's the healthy part of things. So Todd had a really good response, and he's still stuck with it. And he was somebody who wasn't taking pills for medical problems. He was just feeling better, right? So we are thankful that the program actually works to help people get better, and that I'm always enjoying the stories of people who make those changes. Okay, so the compared to what principle? This is the first kind of part of the first chapter. There's 4 chapters. So we're going to be focusing on the compared to what principle. And in that, we will be looking at the standard American diet, the SAD American diet, epigenetics, what epigenetics is and why it's important, the compared to what principle, and exercise and acts of kindness and how they may affect your health journey. So each program starts with a little bit of a video. Do we have sound back there, gentlemen? Do we have sound off the video? Okay, let's try it. I hear it here, but...
When I think about the benefits of a whole food, plant-based lifestyle, I think about Frank. He was an Italian businessman patient of mine in his 50s, suffering from obesity, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. When we checked his numbers, we discovered that his blood sugar was also very high, indicating that he had diabetes. I suggested that he might need insulin, and he exploded. Doc, I don't care what happens, I will never take insulin. So we made a deal. As long as he made the lifestyle changes I recommended and his blood sugars came down, I wouldn't say anything about shots or pills. He agreed and kept his promise. He changed his diet and started eating foods high in fiber and water, low in fat. He also minimized his evening meal and started exercising. At first, he could barely walk to the mailbox, but within 10 days, he was walking a quarter mile every morning. Soon he was walking twice a day. In 1 year, Frank lost 60 pounds. His blood pressure, his blood sugar, his cholesterol levels all returned to normal. He had more energy, and this all was achieved without medication. It happened because of lifestyle change. If your family suffers from diabetes or heart disease, You may think this is your destiny too. But did you know that changing your behavior can change the way your genes express themselves? The choices you make will determine much of your health destiny. So if you choose to be a couch potato and fill your body with high-calorie processed foods from the standard American diet, I'll explain that in a minute, you will most likely end up overweight and with some form of chronic metabolic disease such as high blood pressure, heart disease, or diabetes. But if you eat minimally processed plant foods and exercise regularly, you can prevent and even reverse many of the diseases that are so prevalent today. And there's also evidence that you can pass these good genes, we call it epigenetics, those changes onto your children. So, what is that standard American diet? Well, the quick answer is that it's highly processed food with little nutritional value. Basically, engineered food that is far from its natural state. It's usually high in calories, fat, sugar, and salt. The main culprits in these foods are saturated and trans fats, refined carbohydrates, refined and artificial sweeteners, and animal proteins. We'll talk more about this later in the session. When you're trying to eat foods that are better for you, you may wonder, is this food healthy? When my patients ask the question, I may answer, compared to what? We all know that some foods are healthier than others. Let's look at the whole food spectrum. Here we see a sausage, some cheese, a whole wheat blueberry muffin, and an apple. Which is the most unhealthy? Most of us agree it's the sausage. What might be next? Well, cheese is probably a little better. Slightly healthier, maybe the whole wheat muffin. And the healthiest, I think we'd all agree, the apple. Start evaluating the foods you eat in terms of the compared to what principle. And try to add more of the healthier foods into that meal plan. You don't need to eat only the perfect healthy food to move your meal in a more positive direction. Just remember that some foods are healthier than others, and by making healthier choices, you can positively impact your health.
Let's talk about how to apply the compared to what principle in the grocery store. One of the best things you can do is begin to read labels. Look at the list of ingredients. Is there a long list of items you don't recognize, or is the product fairly simple using recognizable ingredients with mostly plants? Also, check the nutrition facts on the label. Is the product high in added sugars, trans or saturated fats, or salt? Is there little or no fiber? If this all seems overwhelming, don't worry. We'll talk about healthier replacements in the course. In your own kitchen, you can apply the compared to what principle by finding healthy, tasty recipes to replace your less healthy ones. Or challenge yourself to improve some of your favorite less healthy recipes by adding vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, and decrease the amount of oils, salt, and sugars. Try replacing meat in recipes with plant-based options such as beans or nuts, and replace dairy with popular alternatives made with cashews, almonds, soy, rice, or coconut. You can also apply the compared to what principle when you eat out by looking for plant-based options on the menu. Often these are high in oil, but you can ask that the chef reduce or eliminate the oil. Most restaurants are more than happy to oblige this type of request.
Your body was made to be active, and you'll experience tremendous benefits from adding exercise into your daily routine. Aim for at least 30 minutes of moderate exercise like walking, or 15 minutes of vigorous exercise such as running. We live in a busy, fast-paced, and often unfeeling world. It's easy to feel like you're fighting just to stay afloat, but there's a real joy in being kind. Start a new evening routine and write down your most significant act of kindness for that day. Doesn't have to be anything huge. Maybe you open the door for someone or let someone merge into your lane of traffic. Each kind thing you do will strengthen your sense of well-being and help you feel happier and more whole. And who knows? Your acts of kindness may inspire other people to be kind too. You know, what goes around comes around.
Well, that was a nice little video, wasn't it? Yeah, I thought they did a real nice job on that. Okay, let's dig in and see what we can learn. Frank, he was quite a character, I tell you. He did tell me the story that we just told about the fellow with diabetes who actually made it go away in a year's time. That visit, when I saw him, really the last time I saw him, was a year out. Everything was perfectly normal. And I said, Frank, you made incredible changes. How was it? I mean, those are big things you did. And he said, well, Doc, there was one problem. He said, this last year I had 2 custom suits made, and when I got them home, they were both too big. And then he broke out into a big smile. Like, he got me, because he had me worried there for a little bit. So Frank did very well, and that was the first time I had ever seen such a thing happen. That changed my whole perspective on medicine and what can happen in people's lives. Not everybody's willing to make the change. I was thankful that God sent me Frank, who was actually willing to do it. I love stubbornness, and Frank had all the stubbornness he needed, okay, as long as it's going in the right direction. You know, being healthy is more than just eating. It really has to do with caring for your whole self. And at the end of the video, you heard something about thankfulness. You heard about exercise. All the little things make really a big difference. We've introduced already this compared to what principle, chapter 2, next week, chapter 3 and 4. As grown principle, the plant-centric principle, and then the health momentum principle. So those are the 4 that we're going to be looking at. So, let's ask a question. Is anybody willing to share what motivated you to come to the program this evening? Yes.
I got your book a few years ago, and I was using it, and I got where I wanted to be and did well, but then I kind of slacked off of it, and so I got where I didn't want to be. So
Okay.
I'm hoping to come to these and get back where I need to be.
So there's a good one. She's already done it. She's, retread? Is that what you call it? Yeah. Coming back to be reminded. And it's common for us. You know, the stress comes into our life, and we'll tend to slip back a little bit. That doesn't mean our body doesn't still have the ability to heal itself. So you're doing the right thing. Anybody else? Yes, there's somebody in the back. Oh, we got somebody here. Okay.
Well, for me, I'm new to being, vegetarian and everything. But the thing for me was when I was sick a while ago, I had my broken bones, and I developed stomach ulcers. So I started doing research on ways to prevent it, stuff to eat while you're on it, and it all kept coming up as plant-based foods. So that's why I'm here, to get more knowledge on, to try to help that.
There's good rationale for that, too, because the digestive process of protein takes a lot more acid than carbohydrates or the fats themselves. So the acid will be stimulated. Yes?
I think the reason why I came tonight was because I have been trying like mad for the last several years to try to lose a bunch of weight that the doctors have been wanting. And I have tried every diet that I can think of, and nothing has been working. And I wanted to come see if there was something else that I was missing, because I'm willing to learn and try to correct it.
That's excellent. Thank you. We're glad you're here, and we'll point you in the right direction. From what I've seen, the most effective for people who are having a hard time kind of dealing with the diseases, have a hard time exercising, those types of things, the diet can make a huge difference when adhered to carefully. So good to see some younger folks here, some folks that don't look like they have any illnesses at all. Of course, we're glad you're all here, and I trust that you find it helpful. Let's talk a little about the standard American diet. So, standard American diet is not healthy. You see, back in the early 1900s, the government has a responsibility of keeping people healthy and making sure there's plenty of food. So they began looking for ways to improve the health. I know when I was in college, I was in biology, and we had a senior seminar, and our discussion was, are we able to grow enough food to feed the population? Because the population is growing. There's this big population boom. Are we going to be able to feed? So I was given the job of arguing the side of, yes, we'll be able to have enough food, but others were asked to argue on the other side. So that was a big argument in those days. And the way it was dealt with from a government level was to encourage the making of food that provided calories for people, because we need enough calories to go around to everybody. So they did a lot of things. One of the things they did was to refine foods to make their shelf life a little bit longer. On page 13 of your little booklet there, you can see some of the things that were improvements brought to food. Making calorie-dense foods with a low spoilage rate. So if you can get a lot of calories in a small amount of food and it won't spoil, that'll go a long ways and last a long time. Well, the problem was high-calorie foods with minimal nutritional value, and then we begin to have more of these kind of nutritional deficiency diseases or nutritional excess disease. People not getting enough nutrients and getting too many calories. And too many calories also causes problems. The second one, they removed the fiber and they took away the polyunsaturated fats. One of the quiz questions, right, was the polyunsaturated fats. It ends up that those polyunsaturated fats, when you take them out of the plant, they deteriorate rather quickly. Light, air, time, and those polyunsaturated fats start to fall apart. You've all tasted it. We call it rancidity, right? When something turns rancid, it's those good fats going bad, because the bad fats don't do that, right? So when they took out the fiber, they removed something that was very important too. And anybody who's wrestled with some significant constipation knows something about what happens when you take fiber out. There's just very little inside your gut, and it gets really hard in there, and it can be hard to pass. Well, that caused significant trouble, and we'll talk some more about that. But that fiber was also in our gut and helped in our colon make good bacteria. We now know a lot about what's called the microbiome, the bacteria that live in our gut. And when those are good ones, our whole body does better. It's amazing what we're learning. We've got a lot more to learn, but we know that fiber is important. So they made improved foods that were really good at reaching what they call the bliss point. And they even advertise, right? I bet you can't eat one. So those potato chips are just right, just the right amount of salt, just the right amount of sugar, and you just want to keep eating them. And that's the way they've designed all kinds of foods. They bring us pleasure, and we tend to take too many. So that causes us to overeat. They replaced saturated fats with unsaturated trans fats. We'll talk a little bit more about that. It ends up that trans fats are actually worse than saturated fats. And then they develop these artificial sweeteners. So getting back to the way things were would be a really good thing to do. But making changes is not always easy, right? So you all don't have books, so you can't do this, but here was the suggestion, right? To write down in your book on the line, it says, in the space provided, write your response to the question, how does change typically affect me? Some people, I guess, like change, some people don't. And then It says, when you're finished, fold your arms. Well, we can all fold our arms, right? Okay. So the other suggestion is now use your other hand to write your answer again. Okay. When you're switching from you're used to writing with your right hand, it's a little hard to move to your left. And then you cross your arms, try going the other way. Does it feel a little funny to you? I mean, the change kind of feels odd to us. It can be difficult at first, but the more you do it, the easier it is. You probably have friends, maybe you yourself broke your right arm and learned how to do all kinds of things with your left arm, right? Once that right arm is broken and you can't use it because it's in the cast. So we can actually learn and make those changes. It's not impossible, a little bit of a challenge at first, but it can be done. Okay. The 4 culprits of the standard American diet, and I was asked to choose the 4 worst ones, so we're going to go through them. Are you ready? The first one is trans fats. So trans fats work something like this. It was back in the 1950s that we began to get data out of the Framingham study. Have you heard of the Framingham study? Framingham is a town somewhere in Massachusetts, and some scientists got together with the government and said, we are going to study the population and find out about health for the population. So the federal government has and continues to this day to put money into the population in Framingham, and they're testing them all the time to see what's happening. One of the first things that started to come out was the higher the cholesterol in our bodies, the more likely we were to have a heart attack. Y'all remember hearing that? Yeah. So now I was a pretty young kid in those days, but I grew up hearing that cholesterol causes heart attacks, right? And so first thing they tried to do was to get the cholesterol out of the diet. Well, again, another one of the quiz questions. Plants don't have cholesterol. So if you're taking cholesterol out of your diet, you kind of need to get rid of animal products because animal products have cholesterol in them. Well, when they did the studies, they found that, yeah, it lowered the cholesterol a little bit, but just a little bit. It wasn't enough to make that much difference. What was wrong with the logic? The logic is now obvious, but it wasn't at first. We're animals. We make our own cholesterol, okay? Oh! And then, as the Framingham study proceeded, they learned that saturated fats, the long, straight fats, are the ones that really raise our cholesterol. So then they taught us we need to get rid of saturated fat. Now, saturated fat has been used a lot, and we try to get it out of our diets, and it's not real easy to do. Fats act differently depending on the kind of fat they are, and saturated fats are the ones that make great cookies, great cake, and great pie crusts. You just can't make a great pie crust using oil. It's really hard. It's the saturated fat, it's those long, straight ones that stimulate the cholesterol. So the customer in the United States said, we want food without saturated fat. So the people who are manufacturing tried to do the switch. And it was a little bit of a challenge, but they came up with an old idea that worked really well. You see, unsaturated fats, and my wife's eyes always roll when I do this, so you'll just have to excuse her. This is a little bit of physical chemistry, okay? A saturated fat is a string of carbons, usually in our body about 18, although they can get longer and shorter, okay? So each carbon has 4 hands, and on each side, each carbon hangs on to hydrogen. So now we have a chain of carbons with these little bumps of hydrogen all along. That's a saturated fat. If 2 carbons fall in love, excuse the anthropomorphizing, they let go of the hydrogens and they start to hug each other, it ends up that the fat turns into a bend, okay? So now we have what's called a monounsaturated fat. Now, sometimes more than one pair of carbons fall in love, and if that's the case, we have a polyunsaturated fat. Now, it's very interesting for fats, one side always stays straight, and the bends are on the other side. So these are the polyunsaturated fats, the ones that are a little bit unstable when you heat them or take them out. These are the saturated fats. Saturated fats act saturated. Well, American public wanted unsaturated fats, but the manufacturers still needed the taste and the feel and everything to work. They still needed nice pie crusts. So they figured out, instead of doing this, they could do this. By just flipping that a little bit, and that's called the trans fat, okay? So this is called the cis position, and that's called the trans position. So they could say it's an unsaturated fat. And it acted like a saturated fat. Perfect, right? We were all overjoyed. Our labels said unsaturated fat. Now we're all happy, only to discover that trans fats are worse than saturated fats. In the Nurses' Health Study, there was a 51% increase in heart attack from the trans fats and having about the same amount every day that's in a serving of French fries. Okay, so not all that much. It really fits into our dietary patterns. So the first thing that we said was not a good idea in our diets is trans fats. And we want to get those out. And I can tell you the government's been working on that for quite some time. And industry has been working on it. I had the privilege of reading a whole kind of discussion about when industry and government got together and had a discussion. Why is it taking you guys so long to get the saturated fats out, the government was asking. And the industry explained why. It's been quite a journey for them, but they've made significant progress, although there's still trans fats out there. I will tell you that at the time that I first became acquainted with this, for the American diet, about half was coming from foods that were highly produced, prepared, like the baked goods, and half was from actually animal products, because there are bacteria in the cow's stomach that also make trans fats. I would guess that there's more trans fats in our diet now from animal products than from refined products because of the efforts that have been put in to fix that. Does that make sense to you? So we don't like trans fats. They're not healthy for us. Any questions? Do we make it clear? Almost. Okay, let's go to the next one. The next one is called refined carbohydrates. Now, you've probably heard that carbs are bad. I would like to pop your bubble. Carbs are good, but there are bad carbs. And the bad carbs are the ones that have been refined. Because when you refine them, you take out the fiber. You actually, when you take a whole grain, for example, they have polyunsaturated fats in them, the good fats. But because they go rancid easy, we tend to take them out. The manufacturer takes them out. And when they take that out, they're also taking the fiber out. So now they're getting just the carbohydrates all by itself. That's the bad fat. Okay? That's not the fat that's the bad carb. That's the carbs that we don't want, the ones that are refined. A good carb is one that has the fiber still mixed in with it. Can you think of something that might be a good carb? Who said beans? Perfect. We've had our discussions about beans, but beans would be excellent carbs because they have a lot of fiber with them. What does fiber do that is so good for carbohydrates? Well, carbohydrates, of course, they come in as simple and complex. Simple is the sugar. So you've got glucose, you have fructose, the sucrose, which is actually two sugar molecules together. That's the table sugar. And then we have things like the starches. So potato, for example, that starch is made up of a lot of glucose molecules all put together. And so you bake it, and it kind of gets some water in it, tends to loosen it up, and your body will then release those carbohydrates slowly. The potato doesn't have as much fiber as the beans do. When you put it together in the beans, for example, now with much higher fiber, the fiber itself slows the absorption. So why would you care if the carbohydrates went into your body slow or fast? A fast carbohydrate, this is kind of interesting, goes into your bloodstream very quickly, stimulates insulin, and tends to move tryptophan into your brain. You know what body does with tryptophan in the brain? It makes serotonin, the happy hormone. So there's a bit of happiness that comes when you eat something sweet that raises your blood sugar. Interesting, huh? So if the sugar goes in more slowly, you're less likely to have that sugar high. And when you have, for example, donut for breakfast, and they're called do-nots for a reason, okay? When you have a donut for breakfast, the blood sugar goes up quickly, and then your body knows but it shouldn't stay up there, so it tries to bring it down, and it comes down very quickly. And as your body brings it down, it'll drop the blood sugar a little too low, and you're now drooping, right? So you want to feel up again, so you take another mid-morning snack, and up that sugar goes. So you're kind of chasing the feeling, so that's one of the things that happens. But that sugar going up is also stimulating insulin. Insulin is a growth hormone. For people who are trying to lose weight, you'd rather have a lower insulin level, not a higher one. If your insulin's up all the time, it's going to make you gain weight because insulin increases the amount of fat that's stored. It does increase protein as well, so it does build other parts of your body. But if you're trying to lose weight, you'd rather that not be up. It also, there are other things that it can cause, but high sugars all the time tend to cause damage to our body. Large blood vessels, small blood vessels. And when we talk more about diabetes, of course, we talk about eye disease, we talk about kidney disease and neuropathy. Those are things that come from high sugar. So the body knows it needs to come down. When the insulin goes up, it increases cholesterol. It increases our weight, and there's a very strong association with blood pressure. So it's important to keep those down. We need the good carbs. So we want to stay away from refined carbs. Any questions about good carbs, bad carbs? Boy, I'm either a really good teacher or you're asleep. So she says, what's a good carb?
Are you going to let us know what the good carbs are?
Well, I gave you one good clue already. I said beans are good carbs, so that's a good place to start. But in essence, it's the food that hasn't been highly refined. If you're eating plant food, this is one of the reasons why we said earlier, just vegan or vegetarian does not mean healthy. We really need that which is as close to the way God made it as possible, right? Minimal refining. When we get it that way, we gain the benefits. And we're still learning about the many beneficial things that come when we get good carbs. Okay?
So if you can read on a box about carbs, generally they're not good carbs if they're on a box.
Well, no, the government requires when you have a box that they put the carbs on there. So they'll tell you how many carbs are in there. But if it's in a box, it's probably been refined. So one of the things you do, because the government has also required this on labels, is you look for the fiber. And it'll give you the total carbs, but then it will also tell you the fiber. In grams of fiber, you subtract the fiber off the total carbohydrates, and you'll find out how much of the kind of free carbs there are, the plain carbs, if you will. Okay? Here's another hand here, and I see one in the back over there. So,
How about honey?
he says,
How about honey?
how about honey? So honey is a refined sugar, right? Because the bee kind of refined it. It's almost all sugar, not all entirely. It's not all glucose and not all fructose, although it has about the same amount of glucose and fructose as table sugar does. It also has some other things in it that end up making the blood sugar go up a little slower. So I don't think it's a bad sweetener. By the way, I don't think sweet is sinful. Some people think sweet is sinful. We got to get away from all sweets. I would like to remind you that when the Lord fed the children of Israel in the desert, he gave them manna, and it tasted like wafers made with honey, right? Sweet is good for us. The problem is really the absence of fiber rather than the presence of sweetness. And it's your whole meal. You're not going to just take honey. You're going to put that honey on something or with something. And as you do that, my wife will make a green smoothie, and she'll put some honey in it to sweeten it. So that's going in with a lot of fiber because there's a lot of green stuff in there, right? So don't think just because it's sweet, it's bad. Yes?
What about when you eat your beans with rice?
Yes?
What happens?
Well, it's really the whole meal. So when you take your beans, you have now a lot of fiber with it, and you're putting it with, I'm assuming you're thinking about refined rice, the white rice, correct? So you're diluting the refinement by adding fiber. You're making a better choice, right? So that's a good thing to do. Now, it would be better if you did it with brown rice, because brown rice still has that fiber in it. But you made a good choice, a better choice, by eating your beans with the rice rather than eating just the plain rice. So good choice, okay.
How about bread? Are all breads the same?
Are all breads the same? No, all breads are not the same, and I've got a little story about that coming up, and I'll go ahead and touch on it. So it ends up that wheat is much harder on the blood sugar than other grains. And wheat bread, even whole wheat bread, tends to raise your blood sugar a little bit high, a little more quickly. So for people who are having a hard time with diabetes or weight loss, we'll encourage them to stay away from wheat bread. So it is got a little bit of a challenge from that standpoint. Okay, we had a good kind of, uh-oh, my wife has a question now. Well, it could be getting me in trouble, right?
This is probably true. I was wondering about those sprouted whole wheat, or sprouted grain breads. Those
sprouted grains like Ezekiel 4:9 bread. For those of you who don't know, Ezekiel 4:9 in the Bible, there's a bunch of grains that God told Ezekiel to put together and make bread out of. And somebody got the bright idea of making bread out of those grains and then selling it. But they ended up making it a sprouted grain. And when things sprout, they're no longer a seed. They're turning into more a plant, right? So things change, and that's a whole lot better to actually have it that way. Let's move on to the sweeteners. There's more to talk about as far as carbohydrates are concerned. So refined and artificial sweeteners. You all have probably heard there might be some problems with the high fructose corn syrup. Let me tell you a little bit about sugars. Simple sugars we've already mentioned, glucose, fructose, and there's others which are kind of interesting as well. Some unique sugars that we don't hear much about that have health benefits. But fructose, in some ways, is better than glucose because fructose does not stimulate insulin production. So you can see, for those of us who are trying to keep our insulin down, a little fructose might make a lot of sense. It ends up a little bit of fructose. By the way, where did fructose get its name? From fruit. Yeah, okay. And fruit, when we eat the fruit, the whole fruit, and nothing but the fruit, we're getting the whole package as God designed it. And that's where it's best for our bodies. A little bit of fructose primes the pump and actually helps our body do better with meals. So a little bit of fructose is good, but a lot of fructose tends to cause trouble. So where might you get a lot of fructose? Well, they're adding it, aren't they, to sodas? They're putting it in cereals. They're putting it in fruit drinks. It's all over the place. Fructose, it ends up, is very close for the body, much closer than glucose, for turning it into fat. Okay, so fructose turns into the fat in the liver rather easily. It's been linked with fatty liver. Maybe you've heard about that. A lot of fructose, too much of it, and your liver begins to store that. So if you start to think about carbohydrates and you want good carbohydrates, try to find those that don't have a lot of fructose in them. The fruit should not be a problem. God has mixed that up correctly, and it does very well. If you use table sugar, it's about 50% fructose and 50% glucose. It's the two, fructose and glucose together. And when we eat them, our body takes them apart. And the glucose is used as sugar, and the fructose is used as its own sugar. And, of course, we get a little more fructose from using table sugar. If you're getting your sugar from a potato, remember, it's made of glucose chains, but those are released slowly. The glucose, at least this is what they taught me when I was in nutrition school. They said if they wanted to find out how much glucose you had to give somebody so they would turn that glucose into fat. And they found out it was about 5,000 calories per day to get that glucose. If you just gave glucose, to get the glucose to turn into fat. Fructose, that's not the case. It goes in much easier. So getting good carbs, the ones that are mixed with fiber in the whole plant, minimally refined. It's not that you never use sugar or you never use honey, you never come in contact with any high fructose corn syrup. Because the truth is, high fructose corn syrup is 50% fructose and 50% glucose too. It's about the same as table sugar. Okay, so it's really that balance. Okay, that's something about sweeteners. I'm going to add a little more before I take questions. Okay, just a little more. There are artificial sweeteners. I've already mentioned to you about our gut microbiome and how important it is to have a healthy one. So our gut is happy and our body is happier. It ends up that artificial sweeteners, we have discovered, tend to destroy the good bacteria in our gut and let the bad ones grow. So there was some rather interesting studies that have been looking at people who are overweight tend to eat more, drink more sodas to get more fructose. Is that because they're trying to, they're getting more fructose, they're using more sodas, they're using more diet sodas with artificial sweeteners. So are they doing that because they're trying to lose weight, or are the artificial sweeteners actually causing the obesity? And it ends up that there's this gut connection, and you kill the good bacteria, and you tend to gain weight because the bad bacteria tend to overgrow. So stay away from those. The one exception, as far as I know, is stevia, which seems to be just fine. So that should be good. Okay, question.
I want to go back to fruit.
Yes,
Fresh fruit.
Yes.
Has what kind of sugar in it?
It has a healthy balance of sugar. It has fructose in it. It also has glucose, and it's going to have a mix depending on what fruit it is.
Okay, so fruits are a good source of sugar?
Fructose, let's see, they have a little fructose in them. They're a good source. They're a healthy source.
A healthy source.
Okay? So, for example, it's really the package that it's put in. So I reviewed the literature on fruit for people with diabetes, and it ends up that fruit will raise the blood sugar, but it doesn't raise the A1C because there's so much protective stuff within the fruit. When you eat the fruit, the whole fruit, and nothing but the fruit, so help me. Okay. So that's a good question. We've got a hand in the back.
One of my doctors recommended using agave nectar instead of regular honey and stuff like that, but it still tastes like honey.
So what about agave nectar? I
Yeah.
looked that up because I was curious. A lot of people are saying, I'm going to be healthy. I'm getting away from that high fructose corn syrup. I'm going to use agave. Agave has, as I calculated, 83% fructose. It's even more, okay? So agave really isn't a good substitute as far as staying away. It's highly refined. So, okay, I think it says here there's a discussion. Yes. Oh, another question over here.
I got one, Dr. Guthrie, about the artificial sweeteners.
Yes.
So what about like flavored waters and sparkling waters? What kind of sweeteners are they using for those, and are those good or bad?
You'll have to look on the label, but many of them have with something like sucralose in it, sucralose. Some of these are made of little tiny amino acids. They tend to confuse, apparently, the bacteria, and those are the ones that are actually causing the problem. So even though they're low calorie, they're saying they have no calories. They flavored them. You can get carbonated water with just flavor without any of the artificial sweeteners. So, yeah, be careful of those because they do tend to make us gain weight by affecting our microbiome. Interesting. Okay, let's see. Next one. I guess this is the transition, and I'm on page 18. Of the foods you eat now, which ones do you think contain the most protein? Somebody's been listening to me. Beans do, but mostly when people think protein, at least the people that commonly come into my office before they've been informed, will want to pick some sort of muscle. Do you think that way too? If I want protein, where do I get my protein? What's your protein for the day? If you're doing beans, you're doing the right thing because that's the good protein. Animal proteins themselves tend to have some problems. It's interesting, when I was teaching graduate nutrition, one of my colleagues was a protein researcher. He and a couple other people, researchers, were trying to find out why, it had been observed, animal protein raises cholesterol, makes insulin go up higher. I know we think of sugar raises insulin, but you know protein raises insulin too. And for some reason, animal proteins do that more. So they did a bunch of studies to try to figure out what it was. And they were unable to figure it out, to say this is the mechanism. But there was one thing they found that was associated, and that was the arginine-glycine ratio. These are amino acids. And there are different amino acids in animal proteins than there are in plant proteins. And that mix can make a significant difference in your cholesterol, in your weight loss, in your weight gain, for that matter. I have an article, which I'd be happy to share with anybody who's interested, by a nutritional research of note who says that he thinks this whole heart disease business is much more animal protein than the animal fat. We've been blaming saturated fat, but there's a good argument to be made that it's actually the protein rather than the fat itself. You know, cow tends to have more of the saturated fat, so we try to stay away from saturated fat. Maybe it was actually the protein that was doing it, and I think we have enough evidence to be significantly concerned about that. So, culprit number 4 is animal proteins. You all have heard of the Atkins diet, right? Atkins diet was, 30, 40 years ago. He was a cardiologist. He noticed that carbohydrates, he wasn't a nutritionist. He said, carbohydrates raise insulin. We got to keep insulin down. Do what you got to do to get insulin down. Get all carbs out. Apparently, it never occurred to him, nobody ever told him that proteins raise insulin as well. So, you know, it doesn't quite work that way. He actually died of his own diet. Okay, he had cardiomyopathy caused by, in essence, all that fat and protein. Paleo came shortly thereafter, and they said, well, wait a minute. From an evolutionary standpoint, if we go back thousands of years, we had hunters and gatherers, and they had kind of a lot of plants. They didn't have refined grains. And so it's beneficial from that standpoint because they're eating more plants. But then the picture was they're standing around the mastodon, which they've killed, cutting it up into pieces and, you know, kind of eating it, a lot of that. So the fellow who first recommended paleo diet has commented in the medical literature that he's really unhappy with where it's gone because people are, in essence, spending a lot of energy on eating the animal proteins, and that much of them is really not good. Keto diet is more common today. You've probably heard of that. When people come into my office and I say, what is your diet like? Well, I'm on keto. And I ask them, tell me about your keto. And they say, well, I'm eating a lot of salads. I've gotten rid of all the carbs. And I'm eating a lot of, you know, it'll be fish, chicken, beef, turkey, whatever the muscle is, because mostly we're eating muscle meats, the muscle part of meat. And I commend them on getting rid of the highly refined carbohydrates. And I introduce them to the good carbs that are high in protein. And that, of course, has been mentioned already, is the beans, because beans are really the plant kingdom's equivalent of a steak. Okay? So a lot of fiber, a lot of protein, and the carbs are released slowly. So these are actually good carbs. And I put up there this name, Eco Atkins. So this is kind of a plant-based alternative. A fellow by the name of Dr. Jenkins from University of Toronto Actually, this has been 30 years ago when Atkins was doing his work. He said, I'm going to try this Eco-Atkins. So he did studies on people. And what he did was he took away all the white flour and the refined flour, put them on plants like Atkins would be recommending, or the paleo, but then had them use plant sources of protein, that is beans. And the same benefits were there that one gets from the keto diet or the Atkins diet without the negative effects. The improvement in the cholesterol is there. The improvement in the in the insulin coming down a bit is there as well. The weight loss happens, but without the negative effects. You see, science is telling us that when you do the keto diet, you may lose weight, your cholesterol may normalize, your blood sugar may normalize, but the inflammation is still in your blood vessels and it's still in your liver. So it doesn't take care of fatty liver, it tends to make the fatty liver even worse. So you're not really dealing with the whole problem. Okay? So that's why we put here number 4, protein is, animal proteins in particular are one of the big problems we have. So proteins are the building block of life. It is what we're made of structure-wise. Our hair, our skin, our bones are 50% protein. So we need this protein for our lives. There's no question about that. But, you know, where are we going to get it? Initially, the people who first discovered it, some German scientists said, I wonder who's healthy. So they found some lumberjacks and they said, how much protein are you eating? And they measured and they said, okay, that's healthy. And it's been coming down kind of ever since, if you will. Right now it's recommended at 0.8 grams per kilo. So for the prototypical 70-kilo male, 150, 160 pounds. And the protein is really your ideal weight rather than your actual weight with all the extra fluff on it. So it's around 60, 63 for the male, closer to 50, 55 for a female. Those would be the actual protein needs as far as grams of protein per day. The average American is getting between 100 to 120 grams of protein a day. So it's too much protein, animal protein especially, but too much protein can also cause trouble. Wow. Any questions about protein? There's one in the back.
So one of the things that I really like are eggs.
Yes.
So kind of difficult to get that out of my diet.
Mm-hmm.
Any recommendations or how much eggs, would you say would be healthy to eat if you're going to continue doing that?
So I've told you about my professor friend, my researcher friend, who was trying to figure out this amino acid balance, and he found out that in eggs, it does not have the usual animal pattern. So it's more like a plant pattern for the protein. I like to say you can have the white part of the egg, the albumin, but the yolk's on you. So that's where all the cholesterol hangs out. And we have good evidence from the literature that if you take a bunch of eggs for breakfast every morning, you're going to increase your cholesterol and cause trouble. But if you can do the egg whites, to hold your, baked goods together, whatever it may be, I don't see such a problem with that. I think the egg whites are not a problem, just from what I know. What did you say? Egg on your face? Is that what you said? Okay. So, are we able to get enough? And some of you may have heard me say this before, but to me this is a powerful example for you. Everything that's alive has protein in it. An orange has about 8% of the calories from protein. Now, you didn't think that oranges had protein, did you? But it's alive. Even lettuce has protein in it. Potatoes have about 11% of the calories from protein. Beans have somewhere between 22 and 26%, and that's the same as it is for beef, 22 to 26% of the calories. Now, it depends on how lean it is, obviously. But if you look at it, what are the other calories when you take this protein food, beef? What are the other 70% of the calories? It's fat. If we were really calling the food for its major component, we would say beef is not protein. We would say beef is fat. Okay? So beans are your perfect replacement. Now, here's the kicker, and I like this one better, so you'll hear me say it again, very likely. When is it in your life that you have the most protein needs? When you're doubling your weight in 9, 12 months. Baby, that first year of life, right? What is the ideal food for doubling your weight in a year's time? Mother's milk. What do you think the percent calories of protein is in breast milk?
0.
It's around 6%. I mean, 6 to 8% in that range. But depending on whether you count the colostrum, you know, the first milk out has extra protein in it because of antibodies, and antibodies are made out of protein. So it's amazing to me that we have this idea that we need so much of it. It doesn't really hold true. So if you want that full feeling that you get when you have enough protein, and protein is a part of satiety, go for the beans. And I will tell patients, focus on the legumes or the beans. Put a little ground beef with your beans, better than having a steak. That would be a mistake. Okay. Okay, what about genes? Somebody raised the question about what kind of bread. And there's a fascinating, I first learned about this really from the bread end of things. This whole business of genes and whether they can change. First study I saw was actually done in Scandinavia where they gave people rye bread or dark pasta in one group, and in the other group they got white bread and potatoes. Okay, so wheat bread, potatoes, rye bread, and dark pasta. They took a sample of their fat from under the skin, put a needle under, put it in the freezer. Waited 6, 8 weeks, did it again. I know, brave people, right? Have a needle stuck in you like that. And then they checked the genes and the gene expression. And it was amazing. These people all were in the pre-diabetes stage. When they ate the rye bread, their genes went away from diabetes. When they had the wheat bread and potatoes, their genes moved towards diabetes. The first idea that I had that you could actually change how your genes expressed by what you ate. Now, we know a lot more now, but it's really neat. It can be passed on, as the film said, from generation to generation, 3rd, 4th generation. It's really pretty amazing what you eat, the way you care for yourself, your life habits can be passed on to your kids, your grandkids, and your great-grandkids. It's pretty amazing. So genes are not your destiny. You can change them. There are some genes that you can't change. If your eyes are blue, you're not going to change them. You can put, some lenses over them and change their color, but you can't change them. But there's a lot of genes, and the diabetes genes are much less like dictators and a lot more like committees. Okay, so you can debate it a little bit. You can actually change how those genes are expressed. So encourage you to do that. Exercise is another thing that is important for us. Some people have a hard time exercising. Exercising in a safe sort of a way is good for you. Start slow. One of the first things that happens when people start to exercise is to exercise too much and hurt themselves. And then you're set behind. So you start slow. In the book, you'll find a place where you can actually calculate your kind of a safe heart rate for you, and it works for just about everybody, okay? The first fella I tried this, I used to do treadmills when I worked at the Lifestyle Center. We did treadmills to find out where people were safe, and we would have them exercise there. But I had a gentleman come into my office saying, I had a heart attack. I want to begin to exercise. Can you help me? We set him at the 50% and slowly moved him up. And now he's doing half marathons. So we're really thankful that starting slow and building up slowly so you don't hurt yourself is a good thing to do. Get some exercise in every day, just moving. Getting up and walking after a meal lowers the amount of insulin in your blood. And it will help you feel better, and you'll digest your food better. Not heavy exercise, moderate exercise. Not so much that you can't talk well. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes. Let's see. We need to make some progress here. Compared to what principle? You've got choices. You make the choices, try to choose things that are better. When you have a choice, ask for something better or choose something better. And we use this kind of food spectrum. You'll see more of this as we go through. Less healthy, choose the more healthy. In everyday life, as we make our choices, we may not get it exactly right. On page 22, there's an exercise for you all to look at. And it gives you pairs of things to look at. For example, here's one that says whole wheat tortilla or white corn tortilla. Which is best? Do you know? I'm not sure I know. The important thing is that you're thinking about it, right? Okay? I mean, there's one down here that's, some of them are obvious, right? There was one down here that said, where was it? There's hummus and butter. I think I would probably choose the hummus on that one. Chicken breasts or roasted salmon. You think the salmon would be better? And the question is, the answer is not 100%. There's not a 100% answer on this. There is a thinking process that we're trying to get you to do. Does that make sense? I mean, if I were thinking between the two, I'd probably go with the salmon as well. A lot of people think chicken is actually healthier, but chicken is really high in arachidonic acid, which tends to make fat cells divide and can make you fat just from, that part of things. So my own brain says I think the salmon's probably better, although the muscle's going to be exactly the same in the chicken or the fish. It's what they've been eating that's going to be in their bodies that's making the difference. So there's some things for you to practice on, those pairs, and say, which one's better? I'm not sure. I think it's that one. Okay, you're learning that choosing process. You're thinking about your food. You're making those choices. So that's on page 22. So doing that in everyday life is always a little bit of a challenge, and I appreciated Sherry Flint as she shared on the little video. You can make those changes when you go to a restaurant. You can ask for them to put in less oil, to use more plants. So those choices we can make. You can go to your pantry and you can make better choices. When you go to the grocery store, you can read the labels. You can look more for fruit, whole fruit, nothing but the fruit, so help me. Yeah, okay. So we can look to make better choices when we go to the grocery store as well. So any questions or comments or ideas on this compared to what principle? Yes, please.
Yeah, I just wonder when it comes to oils, is coconut oil okay or unsweetened coconut just to use as a coconut flakes?
So the general principle is the closer we get to the way God made it, the better it's going to be. For some reason, the islanders, when they pick the coconuts and eat them, don't seem to have any trouble with, as much trouble as we do with the heart disease and those types of things. So we would rather choose the whole food and take it that way. When we separate it out, now it's more concentrated. But there's pluses and minuses, obviously. Saturated fats are not all bad. We do need some saturated fats. And some of the shorter chain fatty acids, like you'll find in coconut, can have significant health benefits. So I don't want to say coconut is bad, right? I would like to say coconut oil is bad, but I think using it in small amounts is a good idea. It's going to be very stable. When you cook with it, it's not going to smoke. It's not going to cause those kinds of problems because it's a saturated fat and it's very stable. But lots of it can cause trouble. And some parts of it are actually very good for us. So, God made these things, and He would rather have us, I think, take the whole food. Yeah.
You keep saying beans. Are all beans created equal?
Are all beans created equal? No. All beans are not created equal. Some people have a little harder time digesting beans. You start out with small amounts and your intestines begin to adjust to them. They get used to one thing. Some people have trouble with gas, right? Mm-hmm. To err is human. Lentils tend to cause less gas than other beans. So you can kind of start on that side if you'd like. And there's all kinds of different flavors. The dark beans are going to have more of the dark antioxidants. So start small, build up slowly, and they're really good for us in a lot of different ways. But they're not all equal, you know, just like people, human beings. We're all a little bit different. We still have a couple up here. This hand has been up, I think, for quite some time. If we can get a microphone, and then I guess you can pass it.
Okay, yogurt is bad for you, but is coconut yogurt?
Yogurt?
Yogurt, coconut yogurt. Is that
Coconut
good for you?
yogurt, like it's kind of a plant-based yogurt.
Yes.
I think you can get several kinds. The protein source in regular yogurt, I am not sure of. I'm not exactly sure what the bacteria do, because yogurt, of course, is milk that bacteria have chewed on. And milk has a lot of sugar in it. It's called galactose. It's not sweet to our taste, but it turns into sugar in our blood. People who have diabetes should stay away from milk because milk tends to increase the sugar from that standpoint, okay? So I would say I'm not 100% sure what the bacteria do. I know they turn yogurt a little bit sour because the bacteria are making products that are a little more sour. So I don't know how healthy it is. I don't even know for sure that it's 100% bad from a protein standpoint. I have to do more research on that. The coconut ones, where they will use some thickeners, they'll use some bacteria, they try to put it in to keep it active, good bacteria, the lactobacillus, which are so good for our gut. So I think that's a good choice, but it'll depend, at least in a way, on how much sugar they put in, right? Because we tend to sweeten our yogurts because the sour may not be as pleasant to some. People like me who really like sweet, don't care for the yogurt that way. Go ahead.
What are your thoughts on oatmeal and oat milk?
Oatmeal is made of oats, obviously. It's got a lot of fiber in it. It's got a lot of carbs in it. It's got good protein in it. And when we take it, early in the day, it tends to decrease the number of calories that we want later in the day. It's very good food. And it's a good protein source, too.
And how about the oat milk?
What about oat milk? I think it's a reasonable choice. We've gotten used to having milk with cereal and those types of things, and an oat milk is going to be better than a cow's milk. And I don't know that we have time to get into all of the details on that. Yes, I see there's a hand in the back.
Yes, I have heard that soaked nuts have more fiber or something with them.
Which ones?
When you soak the nuts.
Soak the nuts.
With.
You mean soak the beans?
No, this is nuts. They've been soaking, before you eat them, with certain meals. Is that true?
Oh, I'm not sure that it's actually making anything new. I don't know that if you will soak the beans overnight and pour the water off, some of the sugars that cause gas will go off with the water. It's actually sugars in the beans that are causing the gas. It's not the protein. That's kind of odd. We're getting close to our closing time. I want to respect that. So I see one more, and then I'll wrap it up here.
What about different kinds of nuts, peanuts, and like natural peanut butter with no added sugar or oils?
So nuts, peanut butter, almond butter, those types of things. Nuts are good. If you're trying to lose weight, you may need to limit them, because if you sit in front of the TV and eat peanuts, that's a lot of calories going in. You can still overeat. It's easier to overeat. The caloric density in nuts is much higher than it in seeds too, much higher than it is in other protein and carbohydrate sources. So we tend to go careful with those as far as volume is concerned. When in order to have a peanut butter that doesn't have the oil rise to the surface, they have to take out the unsaturated fat and leave the saturated fat. So when it separates, you mix it in, and when you put it in the refrigerator to keep it stable so it won't separate. So that's one way to kind of deal with that. Those that have a lot of saturated fat added into them to keep them stable, I try to avoid those because of all the saturated fat. Okay. It's been about an hour and a half. You all have been a great audience. I trust that you found it helpful and enjoyable. This is a journey. We learn things one step at a time. Tonight, the principle is make better choices. And when you have a choice, make the healthiest choice. Exercise, right? We'd like to do that. In the participants guide, there's a way to measure your target heart rate. Don't forget those acts of kindness. They do incredible things for our sense of well-being. It does wonderful things for our physiology when we reach out and help other people. There was a great quote at the end which I thought was worth saying, and maybe I'll end with this one if I can find it here quickly. Yes, Winston Churchill once said, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." Isn't that good? Yeah, and I think that's do something nice for somebody every day, and it will make your life better. Well, it looks like folks are standing by to dismiss. We'll have the books available in the back, and the way we've got it set up, if you purchase all 4 of them, you can have them at a discounted rate, okay? So if you want to look at them, they're available. If we need more, I have more at home. I didn't know how many people were coming. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we'll turn it over to
Okay.
Ayla.
Were you guys blessed? Yes. Did you learn a lot? Yes. I hope so. Be ready for next week's quiz. Let's see who will get a gift next week. Please have patience with us as we exit and try to get you guys some books. As Dr. Guthrie said, he'll bring some more next week. So if you want one, please let us know. We'll put you down on the list and make sure you get one next week. At this time, we're going to bow our heads and close out the program.
Amen. Dear Father, we're grateful that we're able to learn about our bodies, about these amazing things that you've created that we get to live and move and run around in. And Lord, help us to be responsible for this gift that you've given us, and help us to learn how best to operate this machinery and put in the right fuel. So we're grateful, Lord, for what we learned tonight from Dr. Guthrie. Continue to bless him. And Lord, bring us back next week to continue this series. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. See you all next Saturday night.